In this video, I'll explore techniques for creating and then applying a color palette. For example, I love the colors in this image, the golds, the bronzes, the aquas and blues that are here. I think it's beautiful, and maybe I want to take those colors out and then apply them elsewhere, such as to this image where I've got a black and white version of this photo. So I'm going to do that. And so let's start by creating our color palette. There's a few ways we might do that. Some simple ways, and I'm going to start by go ahead and duplicating my background layer, are simply to go to your brush tool and sample out some colors. So from my brush tool, I can go over and hold down the Alt or Option key to sample, and then just paint by pulling colors out of the image. And I can just pull through colors that I like, and then as I'm doing that, I get a variety of different colors that might make up a color palette, and I could save these out to swatches. That certainly works. I'm going to back up a little bit. And one thing to note about pulling color, so if I am using my eyedropper tool, the default is to have a point sample. That means that when you select, you'll be selecting the pixel immediately under the cursor or under the eyedropper tool. So it's sometimes a little imprecise to get the right thing. Like if I'm selecting the highlights on skin tone, I might actually accidentally click on a mole or something that's a little darker and not get the right color. So then I find myself clicking around. Well, one thing that you could do is increase the sample size to more of an average. So in this case, if I chose 11 by 11, it would choose those pixels around the edge of my point and average those out. It'd be similar to selecting an area. For example, let's say I said, here's the highlights of this particular photo, and then choosing to go under filter and choose to blur them as an average, and it would just average out all of that color into one color, and then I could easily sample that particular color. So you'll see people sometimes doing that, like identifying the midtones and shadows and highlights and sort of getting an average of those and then sampling from there. You don't always have to do that. I'm going to back up. One of the things you could do is just use a larger sampler to average sort of the pixels around the area. So I might choose 11 by 11, for example, and sample those out from there. Now, another technique for grabbing colors out of your image is to actually allow Photoshop to choose. And one way that people will do that is to use the File Export Save for Web option and then export out as a GIF. Now, GIFs reduce the number of colors in an image to 256 colors or less. And so they reduce file size by reducing the number of colors in an image. And we could set that to a specific number of colors. I could say, hey, I only want 8 colors. And I could see sort of what colors are generated here and save those colors out as a color table. So I could switch this to 5 colors only if I wanted a 5-color palette, for example, and then save those colors out. What I'll do is I'll click on the color palette option here, the little hamburger, and choose to save that color table. Pay attention to where you're saving it. I'm going to go ahead and save it into the samples folder where I'll call this beach scene, for example, and I'll save those colors out at that place. I could say done at that point. If I wanted to load those colors up into my swatches, and I'm going to go ahead and go to my swatches panel to do that, I'll pull that out actually, bring it over here. What I could do then is simply click on the hamburger, go to import swatches, load this back up. Now you'll notice that it says swatches.aco is the file format, and I'm not seeing my swatches. That's because I saved it as a color table format. So that's the ACT format. And so if you're not seeing your swatches, you might have to look for different file types to make sure that they show up. So there's those beach scene swatches. I could then load them up. And you'll notice that they're saved inside of a folder here called beach scene, and I could quickly access my colors by sampling them from here. So that'd be one way that I could do that. I'm not in love with the colors that it generated though. I might want to create my own custom color palette. So to do that, I might say, hey, I'd actually like a new swatch group. And I'll create my own new swatch group, and I'll call it, the sort of beach colors or whatever. I'll just call it beach. And I could then create colors from there. Now it added my current one into that swatch group. I didn't actually want that one. I could always just delete it from the swatch group by selecting it and hitting and deciding to delete the swatch. Right click, delete swatch from that swatch group. So I'm going to get rid of that. And instead I'm going to add some of my own colors here. I'm going to duplicate my background. I always like to make sure I keep my original in case I mess things up. I'm going to go down and actually create some color boxes here. So I'm going to go to my rectangle tool and just create a little rectangle. Sometimes I like to start with this, and then what I'll do is I'll double click on that rectangle and I'll sample out some light colors. And I'd like to go from kind of light to dark. And so I'm going to sample out a pretty light color to start. Then I'll hold down the Alt Option key with my move tool selected to duplicate that to get my next sort of color in line. I'll double click, select a little bit darker color, and kind of go from sort of light to dark within the palette here. So I'll then duplicate that, double click, and find a darker color again. So I think in this case I kind of want some of the blues that are here, maybe some real sort of lighter color blue. There's some nice sort of light blues that are a part of this palette. Maybe in here there's some real light versions of that blue, and I could sample around till I kind of get a color that I like. I'll then duplicate that and get another color block, and I kind of like these blocks because I can really see the panel that way. And I'll then get maybe a darker version. There's these sort of dark grays that are a part of this. Maybe that's a little darker than I wanted. I could always lighten it up just a little bit, sample in from the panel. And then lastly, I'll duplicate that one more time and I'll pull a real dark color. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out, for example, some of these dark browns that are in the shadows that are here. And they're kind of browner, and I could sort of find the right sort of color for my palette. There we go. I like these 5. And if I wanted to add them into my swatches, I could certainly do that. What I might do is simply bring the swatches up, whatever the current color is. I can simply, select the folder I want and then add those swatches in, and go through this and just sample out, go to my eyedropper, sample the color I want, and then add that into swatches, sample the color I want, add that into my swatches. And so that's what I'm going to do. Go through, just add each of these colors to the swatches, and then I've got what I want. If I want to use those swatches, for example, this last one is the wrong color now, I could just double click on it and then sample from the swatches the color that I actually wanted. Okay, so now I've got a set of swatches that are going to work for my color palette. I'm going to switch over and start to apply those to my image, and I'll go ahead and do that in the next video.